I think conservatives always say that, right? It doesn't matter if you're black or white or Asian or whatever. That shouldn't dictate, your life. If you're born poor, uneducated, or disabled, that shouldn't stop you. I think progressives are saying the same thing about gender. That gender shouldn't be the thing that limits you. That sex should not be the thing that limits you. I think we all agree that no one wants to be limited. But we are constantly telling each other we're going to be limited. Look at ABBA, who I love so much, just said in this video, okay, you're asking for too much. You're not asking for enough. You're not setting your standards high enough. You are not challenging yourself hard enough. You are not actually asking for enough. You could be asking for so much more. And by asking, you're asking yourself. You're not asking the world. The world doesn't care about you, but you care about you. And in turn, you'll care about the world. And in turn, if more people cared about themselves in a selfish but healthy way, I think the world would be a better place. Okay, so this is Judith Butler. I haven't watched Judith in a long time. And last time I watched a video of theirs on gender, it had been like probably 3-4 years old. And this one is a month. So let's go ahead and watch this together. This is Berkeley Professor Explains Gender Theory, and this is Judith Butler, and this is on Big Think. If you guys are like me, Big Think was basically the channel you went to, especially after you left the religious bubble, and you wanted to be more secular and more quote-unquote educated. Like Big Think had a lot of really great guests back in the day and had a lot of really great content. I haven't watched them too much recently, but I thought we'd go ahead and watch the Judith Butler, and we would enjoy that together. Okay. Let me know how volume is. It should be good. Might be loud, might not be. Ooh. Okay, hopefully not too loud.
So there are many different theories of gender, and mine is just one. Sometimes people who really hate gender name me as the one who made this up, but that's actually not true. In my view, everybody has a theory of gender. And what I mean by that is that everybody has certain assumptions going about what gender is or should be.
True.
And at a certain point in life, we ask ourselves, wow, where did that assumption come from? At this point, I'm less concerned about whose theory is right and whose theory is wrong, because the assault on gender is also an assault on democracy. We have the power and the freedom to make more livable lives for ourselves, where bodies can be more free to breathe, to move, to love without discrimination and without fear of violence. I am Judith Butler, Distinguished Professor in the Graduate School at the University of California at Berkeley. I teach literature, philosophy, and critical theory, and I'm most well known for my 2 books on gender, Gender Trouble and Bodies That Matter, from the early 1990s. My work has been translated into more than 27 languages. I insist that what it is to be a woman, or indeed what it is to be a man or any other gender, is an open-ended question. We have a whole range of differences, biological in nature, so I don't deny them. But I don't think they determine who we are in some sort of final way. At the heart of these controversies is the distinction between sex and gender. But what is that distinction? How do we think about it? Sex is generally a category that is assigned to infants that has importance within medical and legal worlds. Gender is a mix of cultural norms, historical formations, family influence, psychic realities, desires and wishes.
Okay, so we're just going to stop right there for a second and talk about it a little bit. So right away, this is how I explain the difference between sex and gender in my vocabulary. Obviously, growing up, I think sex was just what we were, and then gender was the assumed pronouns and had little to do with anything outside of sex. And then how you acted was still within the framework of the sex, right? So sex, you were male or female, therefore man or woman. And then how you acted within being a man or woman still made you man or woman. And then, of course, there were drag queens and queer people and trans people and all these other things. But it never really changed the foundation. So imagine like you're looking at a human and you're looking at the foundation is built off the sex. And on top of the sex, let's say it's female, you have now it's performative, like how they perform. And so then you have like more let's say a tomboy, so like a girl who's dressing more masculine, being more boyish, right? So you still have the foundation that is woman, female, and then you have dresses as masculine, tomboy. Okay. So, and then on top of that, you can have roles like sister, niece, mother, teacher, doctor, whatever. But even those things get treated differently based off of your sex. So even how you're treated as a doctor because you're female isn't treated on how you dress or appear. Judith isn't being treated differently because their gender is non binary or gender fluid. They're treated differently because they're female. Right? And as a female, Judith isn't going to be given the same opportunities and be treated the same as like a group of men by men. Now, of course, in these situations, Judith is also going to be treated better in some ways by a group of females or a group of women or a group of theys. So there's sort of a perk in that reality too, right? Like there's something to be said about the reality is that boys treat boys better and girls treat girls better. Now, of course, there's those groups of women who always say, like, oh, I don't get along with women. Women aren't even that great. Men are so much better. Men are so much easier. I think all those women who are having better relationships with men than women are having better relationships with the kinds of men they're with rather than the kinds of women they're with. But I don't think they're having better relationships with men because women suck. Because I have been around way too many men in certain groups that I'm just like, oh my God, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to kill myself. Because these men are so rotten inside, and it's not because they're men. It's because they are this particular group of men. And then I've been around women that are so rotten inside that I'm like, get me out of here. I'm going to unalive myself. And that isn't because they're women. It's because they're this group of women. And so in that way, who cares if you're a woman or a man? When it really comes down to the consciousness that you are. And what's a consciousness? Does a consciousness even have a gender? What is gender? It's your performativity? What is a performance when you're off the clock? So it's like all of these layers, right?
And we have a say in that. My early life was affected by the 1960s and the social movements that took shape during that time. I grew up on the east side of Cleveland, part of a Jewish community, and by the time I was in high school, I was politically active, but I was also taking university courses in philosophy. In my 20s, I came to see that it was not just the Jews who were apprehended and extinguished by the Nazi regime. It was queer people, it was gay, lesbian people, it was people with disabilities, people with illnesses, Polish workers, communists. And my sense was that one needed to widen the lens and see that many people have been subject to genocidal politics and to understand that there are different forms of oppression. I remain convinced that one does need to know history in order to make sure it does not repeat, and that one wants justice not just for the group to which one belongs, but for any group that suffers in a similar way. In the 70s and 80s, I was part of a movement of people who were rethinking gender during that time. Queer theory was emerging. It was in a complicated conversation with feminism. Trans issues had not yet surfaced as part of our contemporary reality. So it was a moment in which we asked questions like, what has society made of us and what can we make of ourselves? There were a number of versions of feminism that I tended to oppose. One of them held that, well, women are fundamentally mothers and that maternity is the essence of the feminine. And then a second one thought that
I actually might believe that to an extent, but obviously not. But obviously my core word of identity is mother, but I don't think that has to do with the fact that it's like that I'm quite a woman, though I think it could be associated with women. But as I get older, gender means far less to me. Like sex means far less to me, honestly, especially since I'm considering very heavily not making more babies, more consciousnesses that are going to float through the universe. I'm definitely on the but I am still like a mom in so many ways. Like I'm still Mama Simon. Like I'm still a mom to my nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters and people who need me. I'm still very much a mom. I'm not sure that has much to do with me being female, though. I think it's the role that I take in people's lives. And I think I've met a lot of males that I would also call mother.
Feminism was about sexual difference, but the way they defined sexual difference was always presumptively heterosexual, and both of them struck me as wrong. I was pretty committed to the idea that people ought not to be discriminated against on the basis of what they do with their body, who they love or how they move or how they look. All I was saying is that the sex you're assigned at birth and the gender that you are taught to be should not determine how you live your life. Sometimes people point to gender trouble as the inception of gender theory, but
hold on, I just want to stop right there. I think we all kind of agree with this. I think conservatives and progressives both agree that the body you're born into shouldn't dictate the possibilities for your life, shouldn't dictate your success. I think conservatives always say that, right? It doesn't matter if you're black or white or Asian or whatever. That shouldn't dictate, your life. If you're born poor, uneducated, or disabled, that shouldn't stop you. I think progressives are saying the same thing about gender. That gender shouldn't be the thing that limits you. That sex should not be the thing that limits you. I think we all agree that no one wants to be limited. But we are constantly telling each other we're going to be limited. Look at Abba, who I love so much, just said in this video, okay, you're asking for too much. You're not asking for enough. You're not setting your standards high enough. You are not challenging yourself hard enough. You are not actually asking for enough. You could be asking for so much more. And by asking, you're asking yourself. You're not asking the world. The world doesn't care about you, but you care about you. And in turn, you'll care about the world. And in turn, if more people cared about themselves in a selfish but healthy way, I think the world would be a better place, right? We'd think about being healthy and happy and kind. We would think about not putting blame unnecessarily, but being accountable all the same. We'd think about our choices and how they've impacted people and especially ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Gender should never be the reason you don't have success. But for other people, it is a reason to discriminate against you. The color of your skin should not be the reason you are not successful, but it will be the reason that other people will discriminate against you. And that's just life, because people are bullies, and everyone, no matter who you are, you have a tendency to bully. I have a tendency to bully. It's just a part of us as humans. What we need to work on is when it's healthy bullying and negative bullying, right? And if the bullying is really helpful, I think kindness is probably a better path, and I think humility is definitely the better one. It's the more wise one. But I know we're not all there. I know I'm certainly not perfectly wise. I know that I have many, many years to feel like I'm going to be wise. I'll probably be dead before I ever reach a moment in life where I feel like a truly wise person. Because I do not have humility in the way that I need to actually attain that wisdom. Most of us don't, right? So I know I'm a consciousness floating through the universe, okay? But I also, on the micro, know that I'm a Brittany and I'm a YouTuber and I have opinions. And I think everyone is playing a game with themselves about being able to handle blunt and honest and scary things. I think it's really easy to pretend you're not afraid. And I am less afraid than most people, but I still get afraid. And I usually get afraid of other people. Not of nature itself, though that's pretty scary. And not always of life itself, but life itself is other people sometimes. And that's really scary. For me, I would love an ideal world where everyone can be gender fluid, gender whatever. What is gender? Who cares? I would love a world where these things are not a big deal. Where boys wearing dresses and girls wearing pants, who cares? We're all gonna die. Who cares? Don't care. Can't care, right? But I know that's asking too much of people. I can't even get Abba and Preach to imagine that a liberal man will hold open the door for a woman. Abba and Preach just made a video where they thought it was asking too much to find a progressive man who pays for dinner and opens doors. The world is not ready. The world doesn't ask for enough, nor does it hold themselves to a high enough standard to actually have options. Because it does come with a lot more responsibility. It comes with a lot of heavy burden to want better for the world.
people were working on gender before me, Gail Rubin and Juliet Mitchell and Simone de Beauvoir herself. Simone de Beauvoir was an existential philosopher and a feminist philosopher who wrote The Second Sex in the 1940s. The basic point was that one is not born a woman, but rather becomes one, that the body is not a fact. She opened up the possibility of a difference between the sex you're assigned and the sex you become. Gail Rubin was an anthropologist and remains an anthropologist who wrote an extremely influential article called The Traffic in Women. And what she tried to say was that the family was a structure whose task it was to reproduce gender. And one of the aims it had was to kind of keep heterosexuality looking really normal. And although it was part of feminist anthropology at the time, it allowed us to start thinking about gender as something that could be reproduced, crafted, cultivated, and that there were systems, frameworks to which gender belongs. There was one other dimension of Rubin's work, which was, interestingly, psychoanalysis. She basically said, well, maybe there's a whole lot of repression going into becoming a man and a whole lot of repression going into becoming a woman, and that one of the things we have to do is to conform with existing gender norms is to rule out all those possibilities of being, feeling, doing, loving that don't line up with the gender norms that are governing our lives. So anthropology, psychoanalysis, they all had their place in that moment way before gender trouble emerged on the scene.
Jessica says the bar is set so low. I hope everyone gets to know what it feels like to experience a person who cherishes them, is romantic, or whatever they need. It's so sad how people treat each other when they think they are better than others and deserve less respect. Bro, literally, like, again, I know that for some people, you know, you're selling happiness in a package, or selling joy, or selling kindness, or selling being better. And I know people aren't always going to understand it until they experience it. But there is a quote unquote perfect person in the world for you. Somebody who meets all your requirements, assuming you don't have ones that are, I think, outside of reason. And by outside of reason, I mean within reason of like reality. Like, if you're sitting here saying, I hope I have somebody who can flick a wand and fly on a broom, like, okay, that might not be realistic. But saying I would like somebody, you know, within a reasonable criteria, right? And what is reasonable is what is attainable. And I think all things are attainable within reason. But, like, obviously, caveat. I just think it's hard to explain it because it sounds like tab and preach, right? Like finding somebody who's a progressive who opens your door is out of reach. But to me, I'm like, that sounds easy. That's totally easy. What are you talking about? That's like accessible. But finding somebody who does that and is still compatible with you in values, that's a little harder, right? Values are what's hard to find, right? So Harry Potter dreams crushed. Sorry. Woodsman said heterosexuality is normal because most people are heterosexual. That's not a norm resulting from a special construct. It's a norm resulting from sexual reproduction. Well, sort of. I would say the continuous act of heterosexuality, regardless of people's desires for otherwise, is what's normal and common. But given how many people were closeted, how many people were forced into those marriages, how many of those marriages were arranged, I think I would argue that our primate brains continued it on because we didn't know better. But if you actually let people be people and do what they want without the pressures of society forcing them into certain relationships, I think you'd see something different. And I also think you'd see those heterosexual relationships performing differently, right? Because even if it looks heterosexual on the outside, what if you're with a gender fluid person? What if you're with a trans person that isn't outwardly trans? What if you're in a relationship with like two non-binary people and then it appears heterosexual? Sure. But when we're talking about gender and gender performativity, are the heterosexuals agreeing that if you have two non-binary people, a male and a female, in a relationship, that that's heterosexual? Because, like, sure, if you want to say that, but the gender then is operating in a unique way. Or would people look at that, and I think most conservatives would, and say that's not normal. But isn't that normal? Because it's still a man and a woman, even if they're trans, even if they're non-binary trans, even if they're like, you know what I'm saying? What is the criteria in which we're rating it on? Is it the sexes coming together, or is it the genders coming together? And I think that's what's important. How many people in heterosexual relationships wish to be something different than what they are, but they can't get out of those relationships? So again, if you're not forcing women into marriages and you're not forcing men to conform to gender, I wonder what that would look like. But right now, we don't have that data because we've never had that world. We do not have the data because we've never had accessibility to that world. Those people were killed off or discriminated against or pushed back into the closet. So we don't even know what normal could be because we've never had a free world to see what it could be. Normal is normal, meaning it's common, right? So I agree with you, it's normal because it's common, but it's not exactly natural. I would argue that if you're forcing your kids back into the closet, if you're killing off the gay people, if you're killing off the queers, which is a part of nature because humans are nature, then that part is natural, but it's not allowing the demographics to really show. It's not allowing us to actually see what a world without genocide would look like.
I think at the time that I wrote Gender Trouble, people treated gender as if it was a natural fact or a social.
And also, I don't think numbers matter too much. I think in an ideal world, we'd all live and get along together. I don't think because you are a majority, because what if the majority is queer people in the future? I hope we don't become like genociding the heterosexuals. Let's not do that, queers. Like, let's not do that, guys. No, 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 no. I don't want to genocide the heterosexuals just because like a majority of us are queer. But I know the queers are afraid of that. Or no, sorry. I know the straights are afraid of that. I know the religious right are afraid of that because that's what they did to us. I know white people are afraid of black people in America because white people did what they did to black people. And they're afraid black people are going to do it to them. I know that straight people are afraid of queer people because they're afraid that we're going to treat them the way they treated us. I know. It's scary, right? It is so scary to think you might be treated the way you've treated people because you know how badly you treated people. It's in history. It's already there. It's happening right now. You guys are mistreating people just because they have a preference that you think is asking too much.
Sociological reality, but they didn't treat it as something that.
Woodsman says the mistake people are making is thinking normal is a moral judgment. I agree, but often it is in conversation, to be fair.
You could make and remake. Performance is important to the extent that we do enact who we are. And anybody in performance studies actually knows that there are performances that we do in our lives that are not mere performance, they're not fake. When performative was first coined as a word, the philosopher J.L. Austin was trying to understand legal utterances. So when a judge says, I declare you man and wife, you become man and wife once that declaration has happened. That's not fake. That happened. Now, what if we were to say that in enacting our lives as a particular gender, we are actually realizing that gender anew. We are making something real happen. When gay and lesbian people started coming out, or when trans people started living openly, something changed in the world by appearing, speaking.
Yo, Elliot looking fine as hell, bro. Elliot looking fine as hell, bro. I was super sus at Elliot, but I'm a full fan.
Acting in certain ways, reality changed.
Elliot, right? Elliot?
And it has changed. We are seeing the changing of terms. We no longer speak about family, woman, man, desire, sex in the same way. Even the Cambridge Dictionary acknowledges that something has changed.
I'm about change. I always hope it's in a healthier direction, but it's always going to get a little better, a little worse, a little bit better, a little worse. Maddox says normalcy as a goal is the weirdest thing to me because it's never clear what aspect of normal one is talking about. Bubbles. And Maddox says normal equal healthy or normal equal usual. Never really clear. Elliot Page. Yeah, Elliot Page. Yeah, Elliot looking fine, bro.
Okay, so when we talk about performative, we're talking about an act that makes something come into being or an act that has real consequences. We're talking about the changing of reality.
There never was a reality. There is a reality, but I don't think we really know what it is yet. And I think we'll all probably go extinct before we figure it out. We had this discussion in the VC where I think there's a big T truth. There is an objective reality that exists outside of me and you and all of our consciousness. And then there's some people who think that reality is only through the lens of consciousness. So basically, there'd be no reality unless we were there to observe it. But I think there is a big T truth. That's my personal belief. So outside of me and you existing, there is something in the universe, not God necessarily, but some knowledge, whether it's acknowledged or not, that does exist, right? So I look at us like ants or snails where we think we know what's going on because this is our little anthill. But then if you look up, there's a whole world that's happening around you that we don't even really know about. We're just figuring out, making really good guesses about it. Good guesses, in quotations here. So for me, I think of myself as the ant who, like, I know what I'm doing here. I understand the, like, functionality of my existence and my job as a consciousness, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, man, do I often look up and I think, like, what else don't I know yet? Everything. I don't know anything yet. I'm still just learning. I still don't know anything yet. There's so much more to know. Read 2,000 books. So I did that and I still don't know anything. I've watched hundreds of hours of YouTube. So I've talked to thousands of people. But what I do know is that reality is a construct because it's perceived understanding. And then outside of that perceived understanding, there is a T truth. We just think we know what the T truth is. We think we know that God exists. We think we know what gender is. We think we know. But there's no real evidence for these things. There's only the belief, the passion, and the conviction. Little T truth. But people think they have big T truth.
Even among progressive and liberal people I know, there can sometimes be a real resistance to thinking about trans rights or lesbian and gay rights or even women's rights. They sometimes say that these are secondary issues, or it simply makes them uncomfortable. Why should I have to refer to someone as a he or a she or a they? And yet, at least in the US, we've learned how to talk about Black people differently, or we talk about women differently. And sure, it was probably hard to learn how to use new language. Maybe we had to adjust our habits. But stumbling is part of learning, and making an error is part of learning, especially when we're learning something new. Sometimes we can all be vitriolic, right? Certain statements will set me off and I will scream. But if I only were to do that, then I would never be having a conversation with anyone. I think we all want to be the moral center of our universe. Like, that's right, that's wrong. You're canceled, you're not. You're with me, you're against me. But we have to allow ourselves to be challenged and accept the invitation to revise our ways of thinking, because that's the only way of being open to people who are trying to make their claim, sometimes for the very first time, to be heard, to be known, to be acknowledged.
Based, Judith. Very based. I agree.
Now I'm less interested in defending a theory of gender.
Oh.
I'm much more concerned with finding creative and effective ways of countering the attack on gender. One problem is that many people who refuse to allow trans people to define themselves is that they feel that their own self-definition is destabilized.
This is 100% on point. Judith has gotten better and better every year, Judith. Like, I had a moment where I was really sick of Judith. And now I'm kind of back on Judith. Hello, ma'am. Or them. But like, yeah, Judith, this is it. This is it. It's hard not to want to get into it and defend, and you get more views and you get more clicks if you have like a strong stance. But ultimately, like, what is the goal of this conversation? Is it to move things forward and to be more open? Look, we're open to gods. Can you be a little open to gender? We're open to aliens. Can we be a little open to gender? Just like a little. It seems really, really counterintuitive to want to discover things we don't know by doubling down and saying, we don't need to research that, we already know. Do we? Do we know the same way our ancestors thought they knew? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like we know now what we think our ancestors thought they knew then. That's why the joke is in 100 years, we're going to look like bigots to our grandkids. The joke is like in 100 years, they're going to look at us and be like, damn, they were stupid in 2023. And I'd be like, yup, because we're all just learning. We're like children. So if you look at an adult's life and you look back on your teens or 20s, you're like, oh man, I was so dumb. That's why I look at humanity. Humanity is constantly growing. In every era, we look back at the last one and we're like, oh, damn, they were dumb, bro. Same thing. We're the new dumb. Right now, we are currently the history of what will be the new dumb. And we just have to accept that we're still in our teens as a humanity. I don't know about you, but as far as I know, the history of the world was eradicated, destroyed. We don't know what people were doing. We're just guessing. And now we have to redo everything in so many ways. We're not reinventing every wheel. Okay, don't do that. But there are a few things that need to be tweaked, okay? And I'm excited for that. I'm excited for new knowledge. But right now, like, people aren't interested in admitting that we're the dumb of this generation. But we are. Of course we are. Just like in 100 years they will be, in another 100 years they will be, in the next 100 years they will be, and then the world will end. Just kidding. I don't know when it'll end. But you know what I mean? Thinking we have the answers now perfectly and succinctly is so silly to me. Just so silly to think that we'll know. Wait, PB says we don't really do that for all history, but I get what you're saying. Like, are you saying like we don't want to reinvent the wheel for all of history? Yeah, I know. But I'm saying the history of the world, like we don't know what we're doing here. We don't know how we came to be here. We have no understanding. We don't even know if we came from a god or from an evolved like process. We're guessing. We're hoping we understand. There's some evidence. There's some theories. I think that's great. We all have a belief around those theories. But do we know? Are we all making hot guesses, right? So I just think like I have no problem with that. I think that's great. How exciting. I think you're less likely to hate people and you're more likely to be chill if you literally could admit that we don't know. We don't know about your gods and we don't know about your aliens. Hold on. Someone said something. Seven said the unconscious decisions versus the conscious decisions.
The idea that we can change reality, transform reality to be more open, inclusive, just, less violent. There's an instability in that that's very frightening to people who want to understand their genders as fixed. But is anybody's gender necessary and universal, or is it a complicated emergence that happens with each of us?
I think the problem is that some people will never want more for their lives or something different. Some people will pick something and stay there, and I think that's fine. You know what I mean? Like earlier, right? If people want to think you can't be an OnlyFans girl and partly a traditional woman, then you're not thinking about all the possibilities of your life, right? Because I think you can. I think it just looks different than what you think it could be. Now, I think you can't necessarily be like a Catholic who's pro-gay. I think that's really dumb, but I also think religion is silly because it's just like a belief that changes over time with people's whims, so like who cares? But obviously, there are things that are possible. These tiny contradictions in life are possible. I want to be the princess and the president. And that's possible. It's just not 24/7. It's not all the time. It's not every day of the week, right? I want to be a woman. But man, sometimes I'm such a boy, right? Such a boy. It's insane. What is gender? It's a relationship. And relationships get to be dictated by you, especially one that's about your own consciousness and your own gender. It's a relationship. What is existing? It's a relationship. You know what I mean? Everything we're doing in life is a relationship, either with ourselves, existing, or existence with things outside of ourselves. Everything is a relationship. And you can have one that says, I'm a man and I'm only a man and I'm never anything else. That's great. But just because that's your relationship doesn't mean it has to be mine.
Our deepest sense of self is also formed in time, and we can't always know in advance what that will be. Freedom is a struggle because there's so much in our world that's telling us not to be free with our bodies. And if we are seeking to love in a free way, to live and move in a free way, we actually have to struggle to claim that freedom. When we live in a democracy, we assume that we're living according to certain principles, equality.
Woodsman says, I don't have a problem with gender. Call yourself whatever you want. Personal expression for everyone. What I don't like is having to drink the whole soup of nonsense that seems to come along with it, but I feel that way about everyone else. I feel that way about Republicans and the religious and the NRA. I feel that way about progressives with blue hair and nose piercings. I feel that way about feminists that annoy me. I feel that way about everyone. I feel that way about Muslims and Catholics and Mormons. I feel like you do you, but don't make me like live your life. I feel that way about everyone. Literally. I feel that way about gender queers that I don't like. I feel that way about anyone that's annoying to me. I feel like I don't want to have to deal with your bullshit. So, how do we do that? How do we all live as a society in different pockets? Obviously, I live in Europe, like you live in wherever you live. We all live where we live. How do we live in a place together, but still have our genders and our religions and our belief systems? Because I agree with you 1000%, but that's how I feel, right? I don't have to fight for my legal rights my whole life. That'd be really freaking great. And at the same time, like, do we want a society that's secular? Does France have the right to be secular? Do we want a safe haven for people who don't believe in God? Do we want a safe haven for people who do believe in God? Where do we all get to live together where we're not constantly at war together? Right?
Equality, freedom, justice. And yet we're constantly learning what freedom is and what equality is and what justice can be. And those challenges, right, the anti-slavery movement, the suffrage movement, the movement for LGBTQIA plus rights, I mean, each of those struggles involve challenging people's existing ideas of who's equal, who has the right to be free, and how do we define justice? We are all the time struggling to achieve that goal. We need to reoccupy these notions and show that concerns with racial justice and gender equality and gender freedom are an integral part of any democratic struggle, especially if we want to rethink who the people are and what it means for them to live in freedom without fear.
Let's just wrap up the gender stuffs. Unless you want to take a break from gender, we can go back to that. Do you want to let me give you the prompt for the last few?
My whole life I've wanted to take a break from gender. I can never take a break from gender.
Get smarter, faster with videos from the world's biggest thinkers.
That's interesting, right? Like, I've always wanted to take a break from gender, but I can't take a break from gender. Yeah. I want to take a break from existence. It's funny, in the VC, we were having it in Discord, we were having a discussion about that video I made about the mom who had the terminally ill, or not terminally ill, sorry, extremely disabled son. And we were talking about, like, if we could snap our fingers and save the world from having, like, certain genetic anomalies, like, which ones would we save the world from? And to be honest, I said existing. Because I think that, you know, existing is hard. Dealing with other people is hard. Dealing with existence is hard. I think dealing with yourself is hard. I think being alive is really hard. I'm pretty successful for somebody who finds existing, like, exhausting, because it is, right? I find mostly existence pretty exhausting. Like, other people are exhausting to me because I have to battle people just to get, like, basic things done during the day, right? If it was just me, I would just, like, do it, right? And at the same time, we need each other because everyone has different special skills and everyone's interested in different things and everyone moves society in different ways. So we, like, really need each other in a beautiful, really Dr. Stone kind of way. Like, we really do need each other. But yeah, I made the statement that I would just, like, stop people from existing. It's a big ask to ask someone to exist. It's a big deal to have a child. To say, hey, exist now. Pay taxes now. Deal with war now. Deal with racism now. Deal with sexism now. Hey, exist. Deal with, like, annoying progressives and annoying conservatives now. Hey, congratulations, exist. Deal with bureaucracy and slavery and all the things you have to worry about. It's a big ask to ask someone to exist. But we do it without a thought. We do it in a second, like, just a release. We do it in the middle of an orgasm without ever thinking about that person that we're about to force into existence. And then we just raise them to complain about their life because we complain about ours. It's interesting. It's interesting. Woodsman says, well, I think it's important to mention in the same books where she lays out are are these views she also advocate for permissive attitude towards sex with children and incest. Who Judith Butler? Who says that? Who's giving permission for the sex with children and incest? And what kind of incest? The world was built off cousins marrying, but what kind of incest? What kind of thing? And also, we're made to evolve, so we don't have to do those things anymore. Who advocates that all our norms are arbitrary and constructs of power built to oppress people? And through some very similar logic, that all our norms, I don't know what this is in regards to. But that orgasm was worth it. I mean, yeah. Judith Butler wrote about that. I don't know. Oh, and Gender Trouble. I don't know all of Judith's work. And to be honest with you, like, I do think a lot of adults, even now, are very permissible to adults and children being together. And I think those adults should be, eventually age out of the gene pool. And I think, like, marrying your cousins and marrying your siblings and getting with your family members, I think it's pretty quote unquote common. But I also think it's like a sign that we haven't evolved quite past all the ways we need to. So I would say that that's absolutely not okay, right? That I'm not surprised. I don't know Judith's work like that. I don't know if that's, something that she has upgraded or they have upgraded in their books. I don't know. But I will say that that is really, really common even now. Even now, so many people seem to be totally fine with people sleeping with children, like minors. It's so weird. It's so weird. It's so interesting. I've read Judith's articles. I've read a lot of her papers, but I don't think I've ever read her books or their books. It's like Adam Smith often quoted, but rarely read. That is true too. It's true. It's really hard for people to read in general. Like, most people aren't out here reading a lot. So it is difficult. I appreciate you doing the research. I do. So yeah, I never want to say like I'm pro anyone who thinks that. And there's a complicated layer to that. But I will say that I hope for a future where people are less and less interested in children, because I am sick of having to, oh my God, like my TikTok recently has been on crime stories, and I don't even like crime stories. They give me such bad energy. But I was on like, people who find pedophile stories, like people who like bust in and like get the pedophile. And it's so frustrating. This couple, this married heterosexual couple, was literally meeting a 14-year-old. And the guy who caught them was like, don't you know this is wrong? Like, do you know your husband is doing this behind your back? And she goes, it's not behind my back. And I'm like, so you know? And they have children. And that's just awful. Like, it's just awful, right? That we live in a world where your children are absolutely being targeted by adults on the internet, in your neighborhoods, in your churches. And it's gross. It's absolutely just, I don't know what to do with these people. I just want to lock them all up and throw away the key. Why are you fucking minors? What is wrong with you? What are you doing? And the thing is, right? I know 18 is arbitrary, and I get it. But let's say, okay, 14. What are you doing with a 14-year-old? What are you doing with a 14-year-old? It's just insane. Insane. Like, it's just the craziest thing I've ever even, like, I can't even process it. What is wrong with you? And I think there is something wrong with people. Now, to be fair, in that literal video, he had brain damage, but the wife didn't. So to be fair. So that's what I'm saying. Like, what are we supposed to do? I feel like lock him up, throw away the key, figure out a good way to have prison, because I hate prison systems. Find a good way to like put these people in a facility that makes sense, but then they have a child, and I want that child being raised in that home, because that child could go on to do something as horrible. It's like, humans are gross.
Stuck in my head, in real life I'm in bed, my belly's being fed and I'm okay. I'm just fine, yet all I do is whine, not to you in my mind, cause I know I don't make sense. I've been nothing but blessed, so why's my life a mess? Please tell me, cause I'm sick of thinking, yeah, I'm sick of reaching out for the truth and living life as a fool. dun, da, 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 da.